Hey friends, Gleb Alexander here, also sitting at home, and let's do 3D render review. Thank you for your submissions. We were actually overwhelmed by them. I thought initially that it will be no problem. We'll just take 10 and do review. But in the end, we actually received, I think, like 50 renders on our email and about 10 under the post on Creative Shrimp. It's quite mind-blowing, the quality and the quantity and all the other properties of your artworks just make me so happy. Amidst this crisis, it allows us to come together and celebrate the opportunities that 3D design gives us, including, of course, our favorites, Blender, and everything we can do with it. So first, let's take a look at the art by Lorenzo, Dalla, Rosa. Just have a look at this bottle. I enjoy it so much, even in the Eevee preview rendering, not even saying about cycles, like it's intended to be viewed in. It's amazing how we, like, vibrate on the same wavelength all together with all this Corona stuff. Corona beer is very popular among the submissions. For some reason, let me know in the comments why do you think it happens. I love those extra details and what can I say? The lighting is magnificent. Let's see what happens if we remove one of the light sources. It breaks apart because the light was set up just like it should be. When you have a glass object in your scene and it's the center of interest, you need to have softer light sources positioned roughly like it's positioned here behind the glassy thing and slightly on the sides, and it gives you just the right amount of reflection. And optics denoiser looks great in the viewports, adds a little bit of the dreamy look, and I love it so much, even though it may be considered to be an artifact or something like that. The Intel OpenImage denoise works just as good in the post-processing chain. Alright, Lorenzo, very nice Corona render. Give yourself a bunch of claps. It's worth celebrating. And let's move on to the next one. And now let's have a look at the Petrohands Designs car model, which I love so much. I believe it was based on the CG Masters course. Looks just magnificent. First of all, I propose to have a look at some references in the similar low-key lighting scheme, where we have very soft reflections. Usually it's a hallmark of such renders, very big soft reflections, and we can try to play with a similar theme, I think. So first of all, I will banish all the light sources to their own collection, because we want to start fresh, you know, to suggest something if we can. But we have the headlights and stuff like that, the emission shaders, in addition to the light sources. I will disable it for the moment as well. So we now have a blank canvas, then we can tinker around in terms of lighting. I propose to add the biggest light sources we can add to this scene to achieve the softer looking lighting, because automotive design and soft lighting is such a good combination. So right away you can see how far the light source spans in my interpretation, and I think the use of these blocks at the top is brilliant. It can break up the lighting in a very visually appealing way, so we can definitely utilize it. And to make it even more softer, here's a quick tip. We can add the reflector object, give it a slightly curved shape, and rotate the light source so it points towards this reflector object, which is, by the way, nothing more than a plane or a curved surface with a wide diffuse shader to reflect the light incoming from our light sources back into the scene. It will become clearer in a moment what's the point of this lighting shenanigans, but for now I will probably play with the asphalt shader a little bit. I started fresh just to build the shaders from the ground up here. So for now, it's nothing more than the principled BSDF shader, and probably we don't need anything particularly detailed at the moment. We just have to establish the basic relationships between the material and the lighting. And the thing that I want to do here is add a little bit of variety to the roughness input. The noise texture will work great for this purpose, and later on we can replace it with the more detailed stuff and so on, but we don't need to start at the complicated level right away. So I'll do the same for the car material. The car shader probably can be replicated with the principled BSDF. If you think about car paint shader, the key principle that we need to follow is have two layers of roughness, one pretty high, for example 0.4 or 0.5, and the clear coat layer with very small roughness, around 0 on top of that, and together they produce the shader that looks just like car paint, especially for our quick lighting experiments. And by shifting the position of the light source, we can control the fall off of the reflection near the edges of the reflection, if that makes sense. So in this case, reflector gives us additional ways of controlling the shape of the hot spot of our area light. Okay, and I will replicate the light source and position it somewhere at the top of the car almost. In my crazy lighting scheme, it will represent the rim light, and I think it works awesome. We're aiming here at the low-key lighting look, and I think it already is pretty close to what can be considered to be an okay render. From here we can further tinker around with the filmic color management. The high contrast probably will complement the look in a pretty good way, but I will leave it at the medium contrast and create a bunch of additional cameras instead. Because it's always great to have a few viewpoints from which you present your model. Because surprise, our models in Blender are three-dimensional. Shocking news. So to do them justice, we need to show them from different perspectives, you know. So it's always great to experiment with different lenses. For example, here I gave it a slightly more portrait lens at 100 millimeters. So it doesn't converge as harshly into the perspective. And I suppose that it will work wonders on the contrast with the main render, which was shot at 35mm lens. So I think we can declare our mission accomplished and go get some coffee, god damn it. But as the last step, I will throw in the glare effect, because we have lots of shiny details, headlights and stuff. Some glare will complement these emissive parts, but we don't have to overdo the effect. Just a tiny bit of glare will sell this car. And maybe the lens distortion on top of it for a bit of chromatic aberration. But again, it's deadly to overdo the effects like these, so it's best to keep it subtle. So the key takeaway from this review session is use light sources that are big and soft, and the soft light sources are big, and vice versa in automotive design, because it just looks great and the car picks up the reflection, which reveals the shape of the car. The double layered roughness, which is prominent in the car shaders, makes it work best with the soft light sources, which reveal all the intricacies of the shape of the car. Yeah, I think that's the key takeaway, and it can work in Eevee, as you can see as well, and that's something worth experimenting with. So bravo Osama, bravo Petrohands Designs, well done. Here is an amazing render by Dave. It gives me the 80s vibes. Space burger in the middle of the nowhere with the aliens crew serving you. This is such an 80s thing. Well, what I can suggest is that we change the dynamics of the camera movement to make it slightly slower and thus realistic, I guess. And maybe add a few different takes and then edit it together. something along these lines. And by the way, this is the Eevee render, obviously, so it runs in semi-real time. I would say it runs about 10 FPS, which is great, considering how much is going on in terms of volumetric lighting and ambient occlusion. And here I'm cranking up the ambient occlusion because it's important to ground your models. I think that's usually what I try to do to make it a little bit more, well, grounded in reality. Okay, what's next? I think the Space Burger sign can be emphasized ever so slightly, so I'm adding a few light sources of a greenish color just to punch it furthermore. As for the camera movement, I'm going to sketch it up in a very rough manner by utilizing the 3D cursor as a kind of a pivot point around which I will rotate the camera to try to simulate the camera movement. Here I'm raising the camera up a bit to give it slightly different perspective. And from this point, I think we will go this way and we will lower the camera gradually for this kind of a crane movement, if that makes sense. One cool little trick that I abuse so often is enable the auto keying mode, so we can just do things in real time and get it recorded on the fly if your video card allows you to do it. I'm double pressing R to rotate the camera around the 3D cursor, which is the pivot point for the camera. And here we got our first animation. Let's now make the second one. This will be the medium close-up shot, something like that. And I'm thinking about this type of gradual panning or orbiting, and maybe we can play with a different type of lens just for the sake of variety. 24mm for this, not a fisheye look, but closer to the fisheye look, I guess. I'm sliding the keyframes down the timeline because it will be the second cut. So yeah, I will be editing it on the fly as well. Have a look. Here is the second shot. A space-themed cafe lost in the middle of nowhere, ready to abduct all your money. Really well done. Very enjoyable composition and animation, and I've said that I really dig this vibe. So we need your vote. Let us know in the comments below whether we improved it or actually made it worse. Let's have a look now at what Abdullah has sent us. It's a video of bronchial tubes and alveoli. I hope I pronounced everything correctly. I could be dead wrong about it, though. Anyway, thanks for sending us this amazing animation rendered in Eevee. What can we suggest about the potential improvements, if anything? First of all, on the left is the reference image. And what can we do to make the original animation look slightly closer to this goal? I think let's start fresh in terms of lighting. First of all, add the area light source, which is positioned roughly at the top of the scene, just like in the reference image of coronavirus. I gave it the disc shape. It doesn't make much difference, but I think it looks slightly better. To me, the reference image looks like the light source is slightly cooler. So let's push it in this direction. And relatively speaking, I think it looks already pretty close to the intended lighting scheme. I think the rest of our efforts to replicate the look will be related to post-processing and color grading for that matter. So once the base lighting looks appropriate, we can render a test frame. And it's, by the way, it's a very simple lighting setup. Just two light sources, nothing spectacular, nothing to talk about and brag about. The rest is post-processing. So let's head over to the compositor, add the offset, power, slope, color balance node. And from here, it's an intuitive thing that cannot be explained, but we'll try to explain it a little bit. What I'm going to do is desaturate the highlights. So I'm adding the mix node. I will also add the hue saturation value and RGB curves, but let's start with the curves. In order to desaturate the highlights, we need to isolate the highlights first and then use it as a mask in the mix node. So I'm here playing with the RGB curves to kind of isolate the higher frequencies, and to give it a slightly smoother shape, I'm going to apply the S-shaped curve. Right now we're just blending in the white color. If you have a look at the second input of the mix shader, what we can do is utilize one of the blending modes available within the mix shader, for example the saturation mode, to desaturate the highlights as we intended. So let's head over to the blending modes, drop down menu and select saturation. As you can see, the effect is pretty subtle, but on the brighter frames it will be more prominent, I guess. But even here it pushes it closer and closer to the reference image, so I enjoy it to a considerable degree. And I also added the add mode to crank up those higher frequencies. I'm not sure exactly, but maybe we can adjust the color management, set it to a higher contrast, judging by the contrast levels of the reference image, but I'm not entirely convinced about it. So that is my best guess, to use the highlights desaturation approach. Please let us know in the comments below whether it works or not. What do you think about it? And thank you so much for sending in this animation, that's much appreciated. Now the next one, Agniv Duarah. Forgive me if I mispronounced your name, that could happen. Anyway, the foggy image, the foggy ambience, I love how Cycles handles volumetric lighting. Of course, Eevee can handle it too, to some extent, and in some cases I would say that it even looks more convincing artistically, but anyway, here we have this very moody, interesting scene. We can, I think, play with the composition a little bit. Here are my suggestions. I took a chance to ask Lena to sketch it up for us, so here's what she came up with. So maybe, just maybe, we can move the bird over to the right so it no longer overlaps with the background details like this. And then personally, I think that the overall composition would benefit from different aspect ratio, slightly more Panavision aspect ratio, so to speak. And lastly, I would spice it up with the additional high frequency details like particles for extra magic. Thank you so much, Agniv, for showing us your render. Really well done. Alrighty then, the next Blender render was sent to us by Alex. Whiskey. And the background is high dynamic range image, panoramic one, I think from Greg Zal's HDRI Haven website, which I cannot stop recommending. And of course, the glass material plays together with HDR images so well. Especially if you pick the right image, and Alex, you picked just the right image for this kind of a shot. I'm not sure what I can suggest here. Maybe, just maybe, we can enhance the reflections on the sides of the bottle by placing a few light sources, the area lights, behind the object, but then it will naturally blow up the reflection on the table. Maybe we can react to it by artificially reducing the specular property of the table material, and chances are that it will do the job. So now the glass objects received the additional rim light that may or may not be what the scene needs, but I think we can consider it as an option. Let us know in the comments below. Does it work? Does it make it look better? Anyway, the glare node in the post-processing chain is usually a welcome addition when it comes to high brightness, high energy values. And the reflections of the high dynamic range panorama in the glass shaders is definitely very hot source of pixels. So the glare node picks it up and makes it shine. Outside of that, the lens distortion for extra realism. perhaps we can do it. It's totally up to you. It's somewhat arguable. But if we aim at the extra realism and simulating the real lenses, we can throw it in. Just as, for example, breaking up the roughness within the shaders for that extra realism, even though the objects are sleek and clean, we can still add a little bit of grime, even if it's virtually invisible. Anyway, here I tried to experiment with a photographic trick to place some refractive material in front of the camera for this smearing effect in the lower portion of the image. I'm not entirely sure that it worked as I wanted it to work, because it kind of erases the reflection on the table, which is slightly stupid on my part. But hey, I tried. I just wanted to be fancy. And how about the fisheye lens? Probably not. Alrighty then, the next one is the island by even Topland. I like the details, the overall cartoony or diorama look, I would say, but such a meticulous amount of details, it's mind-boggling. Just have a look at all these barrels and cobblestones, I don't know, props that are scattered around this image, and it looks magnificent on all levels, very professional, just bravo. Power of 3D and Blender in particular here. Whoa. Honestly, not much I can offer here, aside from maybe rendering it in different sample counts and then applying denoising in a kind of creative manner to see what works best in terms of stylized look. The denoiser, when used with low sample count, produces this very peculiar dreamy look. We can try to abuse it, because the image itself, I think, asks to be stylized a little bit, and that is one of the ways we can approach this. So head over to Compositor, and first of all, I will crank up the brightness of the image using the RGB curves. Alternatively, we could have just increased the exposure value. This is totally up to you, and personally, I think that we need to saturate the image a bit, and maybe add this very pop thing that is called vignette. Some darkening around the edges may help us to focus the viewer attention on what is important in this image, despite the fact that it's already super prominent, but we can help it a little bit. And lastly, I will take the image, duplicate it, blur it like hell, and mix with the original one using the soft light mode. This again helps to drive the dreamy look home, slightly cartoonish, slightly stylized and non-photorealistic. When combined with the denoiser dreaminess, is there such word, dreaminess? Anyway, when combined with the peculiar denoising effect, it will hopefully give us something to play with. Here I'm toggling between different sample counts, and this is after the post-processing took place. Even thanks for sharing with us this amazing island, and please let us know, as usual, in the comments below whether we improved it or made it way worse. Sometimes I think that these two states are kind of in a quantum entanglement relationship to one another. You know what I mean? So your vote is much appreciated. Alright folks, now comes the artwork by Martin Trajkov, a whipping angel sort of thing. I love this pose and lighting, drama of this whole thing. I think I know how to improve it a little bit, and let me know, Alex, if you agree with me, because I'm very interested in knowing that. First of all, I will probably disable the subsurface scattering for the moment, because I want to get as fluent viewport as possible for the future lighting changes. Alright, the important component that gives that moody feeling to this lighting setup is volume light. I will turn it off for a moment as well. And here we have spotlight, which serves as the key light, and a bunch of fill lights. I will move it to the lights temporary collection and disable it. You can also notice that something is glowing over here. Let's put it to its own collection as well. and the environment should be set to 0 because I want a blank canvas as usual in order to create something new, but we still see some lighting, and that's actually ambient occlusion. Very well done. I will switch it off for a moment. We can enable it further down the road. So I will start with a simple area light which will serve as the key light, and right away I notice something peculiar going on with the color management, and it's completely reasonable to have something like, I don't know, not filmic when you add the volume light in your scene, the volume scatter shader rather, and you want the color levels to still punch through, so you experiment with some crazy color management and it's reasonable. But let's set it to filmic, because it will give us more freedom to experiment with the really hot light sources. Filmic is much more forgiving when it comes to high brightness values and high exposure generally. And in order to control the coverage or distribution of light, I added a bunch of light blockers and made them invisible to the camera, so it just blocks the light, so we can fine-tune it a little bit better. And I think we can really emphasize the idea of the glowing heart. Is it heart? Whatever. We can emphasize this focal point by introducing a stronger, more colorful light source, and even complement it with a bunch of additional light sources that would simulate bounced lighting. So here I positioned a bunch of extra light sources, the reddish color in each of them, near the wings of this angel, I guess. Okay, now let's move on to the post-processing. Here I just added the denoise node to experiment with a lower sample count, just for the sake of faster iterations. This glowing part of the image will definitely benefit from extra glow, so I'm reducing the threshold of the glare effect to something like 0.5, and to drive it home, I will even duplicate the glare node to be switched over in the fog glow mode rather than streaks for soft bloom effect. Okay, now we can toggle back the visibility of the volume scattering blocks, and back into shader editor we can safely decrease the density of the effect for just a little bit of the murky atmosphere rather than the Silent Hill fog that engulfs everything. I'm thinking about adding an HDRI panorama to illuminate the fog from all directions and make it glow a little bit, if that makes sense, but that's not for sure. That's one of those attempts that you never know that will end up good or bad. You just test it out and see. So to sum it up, the lighting setup looks like this. The glowing orb and the fake bounced lights, very dramatic and dark, and notice the complementary contrast going on. The reddish orb and a slightly cooler main light or the key light. They create interesting relationships of colors in the scene. I think it's pretty interesting. As the finishing touch, I added rim lights. The function of these sharp and bright lights positioned behind the object is to separate it from background. Okay, so we have everything in place right now, including the key light, the orb thing, and the bounced lights, which are faked using the point lights, and also the rim light to separate it from background. The last thing that I wanted to do is actually create a different type of camera with a 100mm lens as opposed to 50mm lens. Let me know what you think, whether it improves the composition or not. I think slightly flatter perspective works better here, but I may be totally wrong. Okay, and lastly I brought back the subsurface scattering shader. It takes pretty long time to render, but adds something important, I think, so it's definitely worth it. And after some tweaking of the exposure and trying to find the best composition, we can just hit F12 and enjoy, or not, depending on whether you think that this lighting setup is actually slightly more convincing artistically, but I'm not entirely sure about it. Let me know what you think. Personally, I loved the original intention of the lighting in this scene, and I think we took it a step further. Thank you, Alex, your art is incredible. Well done. Boom, 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 boom. Philip Alpha Edison sent us something outlandish, something crazy for review. Just wanted to share it with you folks. I don't know what to fix here, because it's pretty much done. It's flawless. I couldn't have done better. And just oh, Corona. Well done, well done. What is it? What's the matter? Anyway, even if you have a look at the viewport, you notice that it's super duper detailed, and the composition is well balanced. And I'm just interested how it would look in Eevee, just out of curiosity, because it's deeply intriguing how well do things convert to Eevee from Cycles, because sometimes it looks near identical. So just out of curiosity. And I think it looks pretty good in Eevee too. Obviously, it needs tweaking, but it translates pretty well. So Philip, thank you so much for giving us this opportunity to come together and marvel at the creative opportunities that computer graphics and some open source software gives us. The octopus animation by Isaac Morse. This animation made me smile. It looks like someone mentioned in the comments under this YouTube video. It really looks like a diorama, like a real thing, despite the fact that we can definitely notice a little bit of noise generated by path tracing render engine. It still looks very tactile, if I can put it like this. And it has rubber duck. Oh my god, rubber ducks. So what can I say about it? Actually, we could have tried to make the light sources bigger to reduce the amount of noise, but this is not how it should be done, probably, because it will change the character, the style of lighting, and that's not something that we would like to do. I don't like to mangle the images that you send to me. So probably just one quick tip that could improve the noise to signal ratio. Can you put it like this? In the final renders is to use the denoiser, and then maybe render each third frame or each second frame. I would opt in for each third and try it out, and then smoothly blend it using the optical flow algorithm within DaVinci Resolve free version or something like that. Anyway, bravo Isaac, it really brightens up the mood in such strange times. The octopus, and of course the rubber duck. Yay for rubber ducks, really well done. Let's talk about the next one. And lastly, I would like to share with you a totally groundbreakingly disruptive special entry by Damian Winnichenko. It's appropriately called Tumor. And for those of you with arachnophobia, good luck. Good lord, what even is this thing? Imagine yourself in the woods and you notice it like this. But actually, it's such a cool 3D render in terms of details, overall composition, photorealism. And interestingly, it's just one light source and it's pretty sharp. You see, it's just one spotlight, which represents the camera flash, obviously, but due to the subsurface scattering use and the volume fog that we will enable in just a second, it works in a kind of interesting way. Even though the light is sharp as hell, the resulting lighting is pretty soft, if you know what I mean. So as soon as we plug the volume scatter, it becomes really soft. It's paradoxical considering the size of the lamp, but due to the direction of the light source and all that stuff, it works in this way. It's such a cool monster. Thank you, Damian. It's beyond the words for me. It's the most ugly, cool-looking motherfucker I have ever seen in Blender and everywhere. The concept just blows my mind. It's very effective. 80 agrees with me here completely. So yeah, thank you for sending in your 3D renders together with blend files for this 3D art review session on creativeshrimp.com. My name is Gleb Alexandrov and you are you, and we appreciate you, and stay safe. Wash your hands, keep yourself hydrated, drink some coffee if you have such opportunity, and I hope it was a little bit useful for you, and apologies for not including all the artworks into this review session because we just didn't have enough time. We're finishing our next course for release. It will be called 50 Modeling Issues from Hell. This is a shameless plug. Anyway, I enjoyed peeking into your blend files. This is a rare opportunity for this kind of contact, and I think we should do more of this. I wonder if you agree. Let us know in the comments below. Do you like this format? Anyway, take care and see you.